Dr. Loeb, what percentage chance do you give it that you have indeed uncovered extraterrestrial or non-human technology?
We know now that in the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man's.
Did the CIA write Wind of Change by the Scorpions?
As humans busied themselves about the various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied.
Dr. Loeb, what percentage chance do you give it that you have indeed uncovered extraterrestrial or non-human technology?
With infinite complacence, people went about their affairs, yet across an immense ethereal gulf, intellects vast and unsympathetic drew their plans against us.
Prior to your abduction, did you believe in UFOs or any sort of alien life form?
All things unexplained.
So some of that, I think, sir, we'll save for closed session.
Hello, all of you beings out there in the universe. We are so excited to have you joining us today. We have Dr. Avi Loeb back on our show. We're so fortunate. We have had him on a few times before. If you're interested to hear about his background or his latest expedition, you can take a look at some of our previous podcasts. He is the head astrophysicist at Harvard University. He is working with the Galileo Project looking for extraterrestrial life. He is also the author of a new book coming out this August called Interstellar. We are so excited to dive into that book. We loved his previous book, Extraterrestrial. I know I read it hard copy. And Tim, you listened to it on Audible, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Just, doing dishes around the house, doing laundry, driving to the grocery store. I tune Extraterrestrial on. To me, Audible, it's a great way to listen to books. They also have podcast music specials that are only available on Audible. And we cannot wait to listen to Interstellar.
Yes, we cannot wait. And in fact, everybody can listen to Interstellar. We have partnered with Audible to give our listeners a free trial. You can head to audibletrial.com/UFO to get your free trial. Again, that's audibletrial.com/UFO. And speaking of UFOs, Dr. Avi Loeb had the expedition of a lifetime at the Pacific Ocean in Papua New Guinea, looking for signs of extraterrestrial life. Dr. Loeb, what percentage chance do you give it that you have indeed uncovered extraterrestrial or non-human technology?
It's a possibility. And the reason I say that is, first, this is the first object that came from outside the solar system that the humans noticed. And that was based on US government sensors, primarily satellites that discovered this fireball back in 2014, January 8th, over the Pacific Ocean. And what made this meteor different than other meteors is that the object was moving very fast. In fact, not only that it was not bound to the sun, but outside the solar system, if you were to extrapolate, the speed was 60 kilometers per second, which is faster than 95% of all stars in the vicinity of the sun. And moreover, this object only disintegrated in the lower atmosphere of the Earth, where the air density is very high. So it had material strength that allowed it to sustain the extreme stress of the atmosphere. And that material strength was tougher than all space rocks that NASA cataloged over the past decade. So if you think about it, an object that has material strength above even iron meteorites that make 5% of all space rocks and that moves very fast could potentially be a spacecraft. Like imagine Voyager that will collide with an exoplanet in 1 billion years and would burn up in the atmosphere of that planet as a meteor. That's what we are talking about. And to find out, this is not a hypothetical question. We can go out there to the site of the meteor and find any leftovers from it. And that's what we did in this expedition. It cost $1.5 million, and I had a funder that came forward and said, "You have the money." His name is Charles Hoskinson, and we hired a ship that was fittingly called Silver Star. We built a sled that had magnets on both sides, and we dragged it on the ocean floor with a cable. The depth of the ocean is 2 kilometers, and what we found are tiny spheres, basically metallic marbles that were attracted to the magnets. Together with the most abundant constituent down there was volcanic ash, basically black powder. You can see it in a vial that I'm holding here in my hand. This is from the last run. Basically, black powder is most of the stuff that we collected. We scraped it off the magnets and put it in vials, and then dried it up, used the mesh to filter out the tiny particles that are volcanic in origin from Earth. And then we were left with some bigger particles above the size of 1/4 of a millimeter. And we put them under the microscope. And lo and behold, we found these beautiful metallic marbles that are very distinct relative to their environment. And they represent the molten droplets from the surface of the object when it was exposed to the extreme heat from the fireball, from the friction of the object with the air. The amount of energy released was a few percent of the Hiroshima atomic bomb energy. So that was deposited into 500 kilograms of material and resulted in melting. And we found, amazingly enough, millimeter-sized droplets that fell off the object. And we had to survey a region that was 10 kilometers in size and 2 kilometers deep to find those. And we found more than 50. In fact, my student yesterday found another one. And so it's quite remarkable in terms of a scientific accomplishment. And, people may say, oh, maybe these things are everywhere, like maybe you didn't find anything. It has nothing to do with the meteor. Well, we went to other locations, which were, tens of kilometers away from the meteor site, and we didn't find many spherules there. Just next to the expected path of the meteor, we found in one line that we took, with the sled, we found 11 of them. When we went far away, at most one. So it's clearly a concentration associated with the meteor, and we are now studying those spherules. That's the way they are called, these marbles. We're studying their composition in 3 laboratories. One is at Harvard University, another one at UC Berkeley, and the third one at the Bruker Corporation in Germany.
So I was just reading some of your articles the other day, which can be found at avi-loeb, that's L-O-E-B, .medium.com. So avi-loeb.medium.com. And you were talking about how these were being FedExed, how you were having to FedEx these amazing things that you found. I mean, what level of fear was in your stomach as you were waiting for these to arrive?
Yeah, so I had to decide whether to carry them in my suitcase or to send them by FedEx. And I decided that it's safer to send them by FedEx because suitcases are lost very often. It was funny because it took a few days for FedEx to deliver. And actually, the delivery person almost left. He didn't actually even ring the bell. He just knocked very politely on the door and wanted to take it back. And I ran after him and said, please give it to me. And I realized that it took a few days for FedEx to deliver, but this material was delivered to Earth probably after a few billion years of a very long journey from a distant location. So if you think about it, it's interstellar delivery services that sometimes take billions of years. And the few extra days of delay were not much of a worry. I also had to send some material to Germany and declare to FedEx what the content of the package is. Yeah. And I said sand. And then I had to declare the value of it. And I said no commercial value. Of course, it has huge intellectual value.
Yeah, scary. I think I would have been a nervous wreck waiting for those to be delivered. So tell us what the next steps are and what we might be able to ascertain in terms of what you've found.
Yeah, so that's the most important step. And of course, many people jump into conclusions prematurely. And what we are doing is using really the best instruments that the scientific world has to offer. And that includes a scanning electron microscope, basically getting images of those spherules. And already on the first day that we came back, I passed through UC Berkeley and looked at one of those images. And it was amazing because we could see a spheral as a sphere inside of which we find smaller spheres, inside of which you find even smaller spheres. So it's sort of like Russian dolls. The idea is that the first spheres to solidify have only a size of a few hundred atoms, and they solidify very quickly, but then they get engulfed by molten iron. Bigger droplets that glue them together, and then even bigger droplets that glue those together. So you end up in sort of a hierarchy of spheres, which is really beautiful. I don't know if it was discussed much in the literature, but we saw it in state-of-the-art electron microscope. We also used a mass spectrometer. After ablating some of the material from a spheral, we could analyze what elements and isotopes, radioactive isotopes, are making it. That's important for two reasons. One, we can compare the composition to solar system materials and see whether we have some elements that have a very different abundance. Just imagine a computer screen or a semiconductor melted into droplets. It would have very different composition of rare elements compared to what you find in nature, because we concentrate those rare elements in a semiconductor. And so you could tell a technological device just based on composition in principle. And then the radioactive isotopes, they can serve as a clock, because some of them are unstable and they have a half-life, a certain lifespan. And if you see them, you know that the duration of the journey was shorter than their lifespan. And depending on how many of them you see relative to their decay products, you can basically clock the duration of the journey. You can tell how long it was. And that's what we hope to do. And in fact, I looked at two of the spherules that came from the meteor path, and they seem to be older than the solar system. We are still analyzing that data. But we are writing a scientific paper that will hopefully within a month be submitted for publication, in which we will detail the preliminary results from the analysis. And that's the way science is done. It's not jumping into conclusions just based on your belief. It's analyzing and first of all collecting the evidence. Even though it sounds really straightforward and trivial and simple, a colleague of mine approached me a week before we went to the expedition and said, many of us believe that this is a waste of your time, a waste of money. Why would you do that? And I said, I'm not asking you to do anything. You can just sit back. I'm doing the heavy lifting. You sit back and relax. And when I come back, if I don't bring anything back, you can say, that's what I thought. And by the way, I'm not using any of the money that you are now dedicating to dark matter research. This is money that was provided to the expedition and was not taken away from any other science. It's extra money for science. So it's a win-win situation where I'm just going to collect evidence and let's see if I find anything. If I will not search, obviously I will not find anything. And on the day that I came back, there was a paper published in the Astrophysical Journal by some astronomers who said that actually the government must have been wrong in the data they provided for the speed of this meteor, because we used the model for stony meteorites of the solar system and it couldn't fit that data. Therefore, the data must be wrong. And that's a presumptuous approach, because I was told that if your model doesn't fit data, you don't say the data is wrong, you try to revise the model, which is pretty much what I argue, that the material strength of this object was different from stony meteorites. Right. But they basically argued this object cannot be made of iron, while I was holding in my hands the materials from this meteor that were primarily iron, based on the X-ray fluorescence analyzer on the ship. So, and also for them to claim the US government is wrong by a factor of a few, that the speed is smaller by a factor of a few than it was measured, is a very bold claim, because the US Space Command just a year ago came with a letter, an official letter to NASA, saying we are confident at the 99.999% that the velocity measurement was correct and that this object came from outside the solar system. It was interstellar. And frankly, I sleep better at night, because now that we went to that place that the government talked about, we found the spherules from the meteor. I know that the government sensors are to be trusted. These are sensors being used to monitor ballistic missiles that are headed towards the US. And obviously, if the government was wrong by a factor of 3 on each measurement, they could say, oh no, this missile goes to Mexico while it goes to actually Washington, D.C., right? So for astronomers to claim that the government does not know what they're doing is a very bold claim. That's what they claim, just so that their model would fit the data. And I would bring a sense of modesty to science. Like, we shouldn't be so arrogant as to say, if what we can imagine does not fit the data must be wrong, because we already know that, for example, the data on the Milky Way galaxy suggests matter that we've never found in the solar system. We call it dark matter. That's 83% of the matter in the universe. And just imagine, most cosmologists write papers on the dark matter. That's a major area of research. Imagine cosmologists saying, oh, the data that we are trying to interpret cannot be fitted with material we find in the solar system, therefore the data must be wrong. That is completely contrary to the way we do cosmology nowadays.
Yes. It's a very, very exciting time in astrophysics, and to be looking for extraterrestrial life on our planet, or extraterrestrial evidence, I should say, on our planet is very exciting. You've sort of turned into a maverick astrophysicist these days, it seems, but we really love that the work that you're doing, and appreciate that you're pushing the envelope and that you're looking for things that others aren't looking for, and that you have now sparked interest in the private sector to secure funds to go and do this is really phenomenal.
Thank you. I should mention also something that you may not know, that in fact it inspires artists, a number of them. Like a couple of days ago, there was a sculptor who decided to dedicate a sculpture bigger than a person to the research I'm doing. So he's working on that. And then a playwright from Los Angeles just finished a play that he hopes will be featured on Broadway about my scientific career. And
Wow.
a songwriter who won 3 Grammys, 4 Oscars, 3 Emmys, decided to write a song about my research. There is a filming crew that is making a documentary with a very large budget about the research. And of course the book that is coming up. So altogether, there is a lot of artistic interest. So I think it inspires a lot of people out there. And when I wrote the diary reports on medium.com, there were millions of people around the world who read them, and they said that it gives them a new sense of how science is being done, because what they usually see are scientists at press conferences lecturing the public about the final findings, whereas the way science is done is very different. It's by iterations. Sometimes you make the wrong assumptions, and then you collect more evidence to figure out the truth. It's like a detective story. It has twists and turns. So they don't see that. The public doesn't see that. And when I was writing these diary reports, they could see how it's done. And so they very much appreciate it. I think science, the lesson is that science can be exciting as long as it resonates with the public's interest. And the second lesson is science cannot be diminished by the negative undertones of social media or of academic jealousy.
Absolutely, yes. And Tim, you've got a PowerPoint, right, from the actual expedition. Speaking of film crews and documentaries.
Oh, indeed. And we're so pleased to have Dr. Avi Loeb back with us again. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Loeb. This would be a great time to mention we have partnered with Audible, and you can pre-order Dr. Loeb's next book, Interstellar, for free right now. All you have to do is go to audibletrial.com/UFO. And in Dr. Loeb's previous book, Extraterrestrial, which I listened to on Audible, Dr. Loeb hypothesized about the possibility of ancient relics from previous technologically advanced cosmic societies or civilizations. And he may very well have found the evidence for it now on his latest expedition. So head to audibletrial.com/UFO and you can download or pre-order a copy of his next book, Interstellar, which we are very much looking forward to. And Dr. Loeb, I've got a few slides here, and I think this is great because CJ and I are both, amazed at the science of this all, and we love following your science. And this is just a part of it. And I really liked how apparently you did a lot of running on the expedition.
Right. Well, I jog every morning at sunrise, and I didn't give up on that on the deck. But after the first day, I realized that I'm actually running slower than usual. I was wondering whether I'm tired. And then the next day, I was running faster than usual. And that led me to realize that I'm actually jogging on a platform. And when I use my workout app on my watch, it's using GPS, and the GPS system measures the speed of the boat because I'm actually running on a platform. So it took me a while to recognize the fact that I cannot measure reliably the way my speed. But there was also a filming crew on the ship, and they decided to film me jogging at sunrise one morning. And then the director asked me, "It looks like you're running. Are you running away from something or towards something?" And I said, both. I'm running away from some of my colleagues who prefer to have opinions without seeking evidence, and I'm running towards a higher intelligence in interstellar space.
Love that.
And here is one of the spheres that you collected, I believe.
Right. These are beautiful metallic marbles. My daughter asked if I can give her one so that to put on a necklace. And I said, no, these are tiny, 0.5 millimeter. You can't thread them. And the one thing is, we found also some biological spheres, but they are easy to basically crash with tweezers. And the metallic marbles are really tough. They're made mostly of iron. And here you see one of them. And the reason they are spherical is similar that droplets of rain are roughly spherical. There is surface tension when the iron melted that kept it spherical. But we did see some examples of mergers where multiple spheres came together and then solidified before they had a chance to become spherical after the merger. And I did a calculation that indicates that's reasonable if the collision of the droplets occurs within tens of meters from the explosion. And as I said before, we also looked at the internal structure, and many of them have spheres inside spheres, which means that close to the explosion, you have a lot of droplets colliding with each other.
So for those that are listening and not watching on our podcast, this particular sphere has almost the colors, if I'm seeing it correctly, of Earth, as if you were looking at planet Earth from above. I'm seeing some deep blue and some green.
Yeah, there was even one that looked like half a sphere that was damaged, and I called it an alien emoji. Here it is.
This is my favorite. And for those listening on podcast platforms such as Audible or Amazon or Spotify or Apple, this reminds me so much of the infamous crystal skulls, but it's not crystal, and it looks like what you might, I don't know, think of as an alien skull.
Yeah,
beautiful.
But it's mostly iron, and there are some additional elements, including elements all the way to uranium. And so we are now analyzing it and trying to figure out what we can learn from the composition. But of course, you can also think of these spherules as rose petals that romantically lead us to our partner. And by partner, I mean a big piece of the meteor that may lie somewhere on the ocean floor. We now know where to search for that with a sonar, and that could be the focus of a future expedition.
Right. And how confident are you, Dr. Loeb, that a lot of what you found is not pollution?
These pieces lay on the ocean floor for almost a decade. So the surface of them could have been easily contaminated by some background materials that attach to them, including biological material. But we are trying to look deeper than the skin of these spherules. Now, there could be some particles that came from human activities. I mean, we did see some shards of iron on the ocean floor, but you can tell the difference if, for example, you date the material age and you figure out that it's older than the solar system. So, irrespective of what humans do, they always use materials from the solar system, and as a result, when you look at the abundance of uranium and lead, you find that they give you, as cosmic clocks, they give you the age of the solar system. But if something came from far away outside the solar system, it could have a different age. It could also have different abundance of rare elements, and rare elements are produced either in supernova explosions or in collisions of neutron stars. And if an object comes from a very different environment, it would have been perhaps closer to a collision of neutron stars, or the supernova that enriched it had a star, progenitor star, of a different mass than the one that enriched the solar system. So in principle, we can tell the difference.
Right. That's a great point, Dr. Loeb. And now we're looking at a photo of Dr. Loeb on the deck, I suppose, of the expedition craft that they were used to search for these spheres and other evidence. Now, Dr. Loeb, I have to say that while I was looking at these photos of you on this really historic expedition, I couldn't help but think of a recent story in the news about another ocean expedition to look at the Titanic. This was the Ocean Gate Titan submersible with CEO Stockton Rush on board that tragically imploded on the way down. Do you have any thoughts on that situation? Because your expedition does remind me, when I see these pictures, I can't help but think of that.
Yeah, so the difference is that I asked Rob McCallum to coordinate my expedition. He's the world expert in ocean expeditions. And as it turns out, in the middle of our expedition, he was asked to comment on Ocean Gate because by the BBC, by many other outlets, because he actually in 2019 approached the CEO of that company and told them that it's unsafe. So he is a very reliable person, and the fact that he was on my team made our expedition a success. But with respect to Ocean Gate, I should say that he had the insight that they used materials that were not tested well enough, and that they took risks that he thought are unsafe, and he put it in writing, in letters to them, to not do it. So in retrospect, he is a very reliable person. And there were many failure points of our expedition where things would not have worked the way we wanted them to work. For example, we had the sled, and the first challenge was to keep it on the ocean floor, and it took us a couple of days because at first the cable was pulling it up, and it was lifted. The sled was lifted like a kite above the ocean floor. And then the engineers and the professionals we had, exceptional people on the team, managed to find a way to go with the ocean currents and keep it on the floor. And then the fact that the sled worked the way we wanted it, that it collected the materials and performed the way we needed it to perform. And then we had the relevant tools on the ship to separate those spherules, select them with tweezers, and then look at them through microscope and figure out their composition using the X-ray analyzer. That all worked amazingly well, and there were people along the way that enabled those things to work. So it's really a team effort, and I'm very fortunate. I was worried that thinks that we will not find anything. So it looks like Rob brought bottles of champagne on the ship, and we celebrated at the end the success of the mission. But I asked him, why did you bring champagne? It was not obvious at all that we would be successful, to me at least. And he said, I'm an optimist. And my lesson from that is that, sometimes life is a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you tell yourself that you might succeed, you actually could make it. If you tell yourself there is no chance, there is no point in going there, obviously you will not find anything.
Right, and I believe we're looking at a picture now of Dr. Loeb on deck with the sled that you use to collect evidence from the
Right.
floor.
So let me explain what we are looking at. So
To be continued.
Thanks. Like, share, follow, comment, subscribe, support. What's your hot take on Travis Taylor?
I've got an exclusive for you guys if you
Okay.
want it about
Yes,
the Alaska.
we do.
Okay.
More at BigfootUFO.com.
All things unexplained.
So some of that, I think, sir, we'll save for closed session.